So this is Mike again with the Zen Garden Oasis channel, and I'm so thankful you're here watching because I want to just give as much information as I can to help you in your garden. So what I'm talking about today is speeding up germination of your seeds. This is the end of summer and we're beginning the fall season. So I want to speed these seeds up. These are cool season vegetables and I want to speed the process up of germination. So I could just put them out in the garden and hope everything works well, but I want to do a few tricks. There's 3 ingredients I have that will speed up the process to getting your seeds to germinate quicker so you can get them into the garden already established. So it's a pretty simple method, but a lot of people don't use it, but it really will help you if you're planting your seeds at the last minute. So let's get started. So your seeds are going to want to, most seeds are going to want to germinate in soils above 50 degrees. So if it's cool outside, if you're in late winter, early spring, and your soils haven't warmed up, or if you're going into the fall season and the temperatures outside have dropped significantly, you're going to want to use a heat mat. That's going to be critical to germinating your seeds, no matter what method you use, either this method that I'm about to show you inside of a container or inside of a seedling tray, you're going to want one of these to bring up the temperature just a little bit. So that's really going to help. So that's one reason a lot of seedlings fail to germinate. The 3 things I'm using today that's going to help you the most are these 3 items here. One is the hydrogen peroxide in a specific formulation, baby shampoo, and aspirin. So these 3 things, I'll discuss the 3 reasons they do speed up germination, but that's the 3 secret ingredients you're going to want to mix in both the trays and in the sprays inside of the portable greenhouse container. So those are the 3 things you're going to want to use. The average germination time is going to be between 1 and 3 weeks for most seeds. Now some seeds will germinate quicker than 1 week. It could be just a matter of days. But in general, I'm going to say between 1 and 3 weeks is your average time. Some seeds that are more difficult to germinate and they have a slow start are going to fall a little bit more towards the 3 week, but I'm going to just say average about 1 week. So one thing that a lot of people talk about doing involves this right here when they're talking about getting their seeds to germinate a little quicker. This is razor blade. And so if the seed is really small, scarification or cutting into the seed is going to be almost impossible. It's just not. A tiny seed the size 1 millimeter or less, just tiny is not going to be possible. So you might want to consider soaking the seeds. And the seed formulation, I'll talk about that shortly. You can soak them in something like this, a small container with a lid. This is a really good snap lid. These were little dessert cups. I'll put the link to them on Amazon. But you can try that. So that's one possibility, is speeding up through scarification if your seed is big enough. But it adds a lot more work to the seed germination method. So what I want to do is I want to make it as easy as possible and also speed the time up to germination. And also the third thing is the percentage of seeds that actually germinate. We want to maximize that, decrease the time, and just make it as simple as possible. So if you want to go with the seed soaking route, you're going to want to soak the seeds anywhere from overnight 12 hours up to 24 hours. Excuse me. If you decide to go the seed soaking route, you're going to need to soak them overnight, 12 hours overnight or up to 24 hours, so you can break that outer skin of the seed so it can break out and send out its roots. So that's what you're going to need as far as a time frame goes. If you put your seeds in the container and you notice some of them have sank to the bottom and some of them are floating, the seeds that are floating are most likely not viable. So you want to use the seeds that are on the bottom. You can take a spoon and just remove the seeds that are floating because you know that those probably are not going to germinate. So that's one little tip I can give you about soaking. But my preference is to avoid the soaking and go right into the next method. So I'm going to mix up the formula, and this formula is both for the soaking and the misting spray that we're going to use. So either way, you're going to use the exact same formulation. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take an aspirin, non-coated aspirin. And these are brand new. I just picked them up today. And the price on these, for this many aspirin, there's so many uses in the garden for aspirin, are incredibly low. I think it was like $4 and some change. So I'm going to take 1 aspirin. I'm going to take I call it a muddler because in the bar industry, this is called a muddle. But I think in the restaurant industry, it's called, what is it? Can you tell me down below? I can't remember. I forget. But anyways, we're going to crush these up. I'm sorry, I know that's super loud. I'm trying not to make too much loud noise. We're going to crush these into a powder because we're going to be adding this to our 1 gallon. So the cost on 1 aspirin for these formulas, and some of them require 2. In some of my other videos, I'm requiring you to use 2. But anyways, this is so incredibly low cost. It's great. So the next thing we're using is Johnson's baby shampoo and the H2O2 hydrogen peroxide. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to mix everything. I'm not going to put the aspirin in until we get the liquid in there because I don't want it to stick to the bottom. So I'm just going to put 1 gallon of this regular tap water. If you have really, you probably can't hear me over this noise, but if you have really strong water, high mineral content, or you have a lot of chemicals in your water and you don't use tap water, use your filtered water or bottled water, because this is the most important stage of the seedling. You want the water to be good and pure. I think it's chlorine that I'm trying to think of. So I'm going to put this in first. That is our aspirin. Okay, we've got our aspirin in. Now we're going to put 1 tablespoon, and this is my handy tablespoon measuring device here. 1 tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide and 1 teaspoon, I think there's a teaspoon measuring there at the base. So half of one of these is a teaspoon. We're going to put that in there as well. Make sure that gets in there. And we're going to stir this well, and we're going to use it in 2 different ways. Like I said, we're going to put some in the soaking jars for our seed and some in the misting jar. So we're going to stir this up, and we'll be ready to go on to the next step. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stir this up and make sure it's well mixed, and try not to make a giant mess like I normally do. And just get it well stirred, make sure that aspirin powder is well dissolved, and the baby shampoo and the hydrogen peroxide have all had a chance to mix in this gallon container. And whatever's left, I will put it back into its original container and label it as to what it is. And I think we're well stirred there. So the next thing I'm going to do, since we're doing step 1 of the speeding seed germination, I'm going to use this one first. And I'm just going to fill up my mister. Try not to overfill. All right, and so we've got our mister ready to go. And we'll move on to the next step that's critical for making this work in 1 or 2 of these. What I'm using is a gallon Ziploc bag. This is not Ziploc brand. I went with a Walmart brand because it's cheaper, because I use a ton of these when it comes to seedlings. So the gallon size, and then I came across these. Now this right here is an interesting thing, because there's some discussion about the color red in plants and how much they actually prefer or grow better or seem to be more, just do better in red light. So the light that penetrates through the clear bag will be kind of a reddish color. So that's going to be interesting to see. I've never tried this before, but it just kind of came to me when I was looking through the kitchen today, and I saw these bags and said, these are perfect for germination, to do a little bit of an experimentation so I can compare the gallon bag and this small sandwich bag and see which one works better. All right, the next step is going to be taking our gallon bag, our solution that we have in our misting bottle, and some paper towels. So we have all of those handy. The paper towel is almost exactly the same size. If I decide to, I could cut it to make it fit exactly, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. This will probably be folded over, so it probably won't even take up the whole size, but I do need to remove a little bit off the side there with my scissors. But what we're going to do is, since these are already perforated so you can easily fold them over, I'm going to put the seeds in right here. I'm going to mist spray this, and then I'm going to fold it. And then after I've cut off the edge, we're going to put it into our bag. Now I'll give you a tip that you can use about if you've done this before and you've had the issue with your seeds growing into the paper towel after a day or 2, because if you don't check it, it will eventually, the roots will grow into the paper portion as it starts to slowly break down. So you can use a coffee filter. You can put a coffee filter on the bottom and put it on top. The reason you don't want to use solely a coffee filter is they don't hold the moisture, and so that's why you want to have the paper towel to continue to be inside there for the moisture portion. So if you want to avoid the seeds sticking to the paper towel and it's hard to get them out, or you're worried about damaging the roots, put a couple of coffee filters inside and then fold it over with the paper towel moistened, and it'll keep moisture inside of the bag. You don't have to worry about sunlight with this, because most seeds do not require light to germinate. So you can put these just somewhere in your house. You don't have to worry about putting them on a window because they might get too hot anyways. But as long as your house is just around 70 to 75 degrees, I think you can just put them in there no problem, and just look at this about every 24 hours until you see it ready germinating, and then you want to move it to a new container. But let's get started on this portion. So I'm going to take off the end of the paper towel so it will fit easily into the, you really need a pair of sharp scissors. These scissors have been used in the garden so much that they're a little bit on the dull side. So we've taken off the end of the paper towel. It's going to fit perfectly into our gallon size bag. We're going to open it up. We've got our mixture here. It's already pre-mixed. I'm just going to shake it a couple times to make sure it's good. I'm going to start out with broccoli seeds, a cool season plant, cool season vegetable, and I want to get these seedlings started as quickly as possible. I've waited really kind of late in the year to do this. I'm not going to do the entire packet. I'm just going to do a small percentage of it because I'm going to use some of them in the soaking method, and some of them I'm going to direct sow into some seedling trays. So I'm just going to kind of spread these out haphazardly. I'm not going to worry about making it perfect because it's near impossible. Now there is one tool you'll need to not damage the roots, and I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, I think we've got enough there. This is the tool you need. This was ordered off of Amazon. It was really a variety pack of different types of tweezers that I used with my bonsai trees if I need to go into a bonsai and pull a specific leaf off or something like that. So you can order these. I'll put the link down there. But when you go to take these off of their thing, the tweezers you have at home, they're so small. Most tweezers are like this big. So this is a lot easier to work with. You can see a lot easier. You can get your seed and carefully remove it without damaging your root system. So that's why I have such a huge selection of those. I'm going to mist spray these well, and really you want a fine mist on them, but you want the paper towel to be wet. So I'm just going to mist spray the entire paper towel to make sure it's wet. It doesn't have to be drenched, but you just want it to have a nice amount of moisture there. I'm sorry, this thing's sounds like a goose. Okay. All right, just want a lot of that mixture on there. Now the hydrogen peroxide is going to help with the seedling coming out of its casing. The Johnson's baby shampoo is going to help with mold or funguses. And the last thing, the aspirin, is also going to help the plant get a head start. There's a systemic reaction with the seed and the plant because the aspirin does that. And if you'll check out my video about using aspirin in the garden, I'll go into great detail. I'm going to carefully fold this over. Now, as you can see, we can see the seeds. I might just give it one more spray out here because I want to make sure there's enough moisture. So there's enough moisture in there. You can see the seeds quite well. I'm going to try to carefully move these around here so I can get them into the gallon-sized container. That moisture is on the outside, not necessarily on the inside. If you do decide to use the coffee filter, that's fine. It'll just make it a little bit easier to get the seeds off of there. And this is a little tricky getting it in there, so you have to kind of just be patient and just carefully pull each side into the bag. And it's a lot, I'll tell you one thing, it's a lot easier doing this with a gallon size rather than the sandwich size because your hand can move around in the bag so much easier. So that is our broccoli seeds. They are ready to go back into my house. I'm going to keep them in the kitchen on the counter and just give them a couple days for the roots to come out. I can see it pretty easy, even though it's, excuse me, even though these are not transparent, the paper towels, once they're wet, they're easy to see through. So that helps us in the step of getting the seedling started there. You can see it very easily. I'm hoping you can see it easily on camera. I can see each seed clearly. So some people will tell you to take this bag and tape it to a window. And if you do that, that's fine. It won't hurt anything, but you don't want it to get overheated. But one reason that it works, if it's not a direct south-facing window, maybe you just get partial, a little bit of light in the window, maybe it's under a shade tree. The reason that works is not necessarily because of the sunlight, because the seeds, generally most seeds don't need sunlight. What they do need is a little bit of warmth. So if you put it on your window, let's say you just take some painter's tape and tape this to your window, it's the heat. It's the heat from the outdoors, generally if you're still in the warmer months, that will start the seed propagation. So there's nothing wrong with taping it to your window. It's just that is the reason. It's not light. It's the warmth of the window. So that will help propagation. Next thing I will say, it's the same thing about uh, the lights that you buy to start the seedlings, grow lights. Um, you can put it close to the soil, but the light is not what's activating the germination. It's the warmth of the light. So if the light's too far away and it's not putting out any heat, it's probably not going to help. You're just wasting your electricity. So if you do decide you want to use grow lights, put it as close to the soil surface or to the bag. If you're using just a bag, put it close to the seeds, as that's why is that little bit of heat. It's the same thing as this grow mat. You're just helping the seeds germinate and making them understand they are in the right type of temperature setting to start the propagation or the germination process. And that's why taping them to a windowsill is perfectly fine if you want to do that. You just don't want to do it on a window that gets a lot of sunlight. It's better just to put them on the kitchen counter so you can keep a close eye on them every day after dinner. You can just look and see what's happening. So I'm going to next put some seeds in our container so we can let them soak for 12 to 24 hours. I'm thinking 12 hours. That's our formulation, so I'm going to carefully pour this in here without trying to make a mess like I always do. And it reminds me of a movie line. Have you ever tried to throw a toothpick into a volcano? What movie is that from? So anyways, I'm going to put just maybe a small handful. These will be transferred, and they've all settled. Well, two are floating, so those are probably not viable. I'm going to remove those. And that's another use for the, yep, looks like we have one floating. So I'm going to remove that one with my tweezers. We know this one is probably not viable because it's floating, but there's a couple more that's not sinking to the bottom. And so these are really hard to get because they're so small. So that is our broccoli seed. We're going to let it stay in this formulation overnight, and then tomorrow I will be putting it not in a Ziploc bag, but into a container, a sealed container such as this. I'm going to fill it up with this potting soil. Either I can make my own potting soil or use one that I really like to use, which is this one right here, but made by Jiffy: peat moss, coconut coir, and vermiculite. So if you don't want to make your own seed starting soil, I said potting soil, but it's extremely fine and it's great for seed starting. If you don't want to make your own, and I'll give you my recipe for seed starting mix after I do this, but this would go into our tray. I'll demonstrate this in just a second. We're going to wait 12 hours. Make sure we see no floating seeds, throw those away. But next I will go to give you my formulation for if I can get this out, if I can give you my formulation for, and it's a lot cheaper, by the way. This is not cheap. So it's cheaper if you make it yourself because you can buy it in larger containers. Seed starting mix. All right, since I'm using the bag variety, that's just what I'm going to go with because I don't have any of my seed starting mix pre-mixed. But I will give you the mix I use for seed starting is 1/3 perlite, 1/3 vermiculite, and 1/3 peat moss. And those three right there work great. It drains well. The vermiculite allows it to hold a little bit of moisture for the seedlings. So if I didn't have this bag here, I would just mix up my own with some of the one I have in the shop. So I'm just going to put this carefully all throughout our seed starting container. Now, one thing, I'm going to get this out of the way so you can see. One thing I will say, that once it's ready to go out into the garden, you don't want to just take it out, remove the top, and then let it continue to grow. You're going to want to just carefully take it off as long as the seedlings are not hitting the top of the tray, and start allowing a little bit of, maybe 1 day, 2 days, allow the seedlings to acclimate to the outside temperatures. No direct sunlight. Make sure you keep it out of direct sunlight. So I'm going to press down, and just where the seedlings will have a nice firm area to grab onto. I'm not going to worry about making holes because I'm going to cover this with a very fine coating of the same seed starting mix. So I'm just kind of putting that there. I'm going to open up one of the corners so I can pour in some of our formula there, and it will wick up through the soil, and the entire container will stay moist. So that's what we want to do. Okay, so I'm going to ever so carefully try to add this only to one corner and just slowly let it absorb. It may take a few minutes for this to happen. I may have to do all 4 corners, but we just want the soil to have a lot of moisture in it, but we don't want it to be waterlogged at the same time. So I'm going to open up all 4 corners, and it is absorbing the formula. And the reason I'm not pouring it from the top, one, is I don't want to disturb the soil too much. 2, watering from the top could encourage some fungus growth. So I'm just doing it from all four corners, and you can see it's really starting to absorb quickly. There's going to be a good bit of moisture from underneath. I'll put once all four corners are dry, I'm going to put the soil back in the corners, so we'll have a lot of moisture from underneath. And I might do some mist spraying with our formula because it's less likely to form. I wouldn't mist spray this with just standard tap water, because then you don't have the protection of the aspirin and the hydrogen peroxide, excuse me, hydrogen peroxide to prevent possible fungal issues. Okay, so I've allowed these seeds to dry in a dry paper towel after soaking for 12 hours. And I'm just going to spread them, not really in a neat fashion, because like I said before, I'm covering this with a very fine layer of the seed starting mix. And then I'll mist spray the seeds. So we're just kind of doing an overall coverage there. And these will be ready to go out into the garden in just a couple of weeks. But we just want to make sure we spray this to protect them, to make sure they have a lot of moisture. Sorry for the strange goose sound there. Okay, I'm just going to just ever so slightly just give it just the smallest little dusting of the seed starting mix. A little bit of a clumping there, but I'm just going to cover the seeds and maybe one last treatment of the formula. Just trying to give it an even coverage there. But this is like maybe a 1/16 of an inch, 2/16 of an inch, very thin, a couple of millimeters. So there you have it. That's ready to go back into the house where I can kind of monitor it and allow some germination to take place. I'm going to mist spray it one more time, and then we'll just keep checking on. I'm sorry, I know you probably can't hear me there. I'm going to check on this about once every day just to see what's going on. Eventually, we'll have to start acclimating it to the indoor temperatures by removing the lid, and then when we take it outside, the same thing to allow outside air temperatures depending on what it is. Make sure it's not cold outside, or you'll want to use the heat mat. So that is how we're going to start the seeds and give them a head start with a 3-ingredient formula. And this, I'm going to tell you 3 of the weirdest ways I've ever heard to start seeds. So I'm going to cover 3 of the weirdest ways I've ever heard to start germination on seeds. And I can't say that I've ever tried any one of these, but I have heard a lot of people discuss it. One is vodka. Let's see, I think it's a half a teaspoon of vodka in a gallon of water, and you do the soaking method in that. So never tried it. It's kind of weird, but I can see it might break open the shell and break open the outer skin of the seed and allow it to germinate a little quicker. So that might speed things up. The second strange way I've heard is by just using straight vinegar, about 1 teaspoon in a gallon of water. Do the same soaking method. Never tried that either, but I can see it might break open the outer shell on the seed and might start germination a little bit sooner. Get that out. The third and strangest way, and this is kind of interesting because I can see how it worked, because I'll go back to bonsai in a minute and talk about that, is to use smoke, wood smoke, and fan it over your seeds and let the seeds absorb some of the chemicals in that smoke. It kind of simulates a forest fire, and some seeds, it may actually get them started. I know that in some pines, they will not actually germinate until they've been exposed to a forest fire, which is really strange, but it's true. You can look it up. So that's the 3 of the strangest methods I've ever heard of for starting seeds. Okay, guys, so this is some of 4 different varieties I planted here, and if you watched yesterday's video, I planted these and gave them a head start with these methods I just showed you. I'm sorry if the cicadas are drowning me out. They're going crazy. But this is all cool season crops, and they'll grow well into November, possibly December, and I'll have a little bit of vegetables to harvest. I think kale and let's see what else is in here. I've already forgotten. My memory is terrible sometimes. But if you need to get your seeds started quicker and you've waited to the last minute, this is a great thing to do. Is you can try the formula and see if it gets your seedlings started faster, and you can get them into the ground so they're growing well and they can acclimate to the change of season into autumn. So that's what I would do. I just want to say thanks for watching. I reached another milestone today, and that really means a lot to me that you're subscribing, even though some big YouTubers would say it's only a couple hundred people. That means a lot to me. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. And if you would, please like and subscribe. If you got something out of the video, please leave a message and let me know. And if you think I did something wrong, or maybe there's a better way to do it, let me know. I always believe in learning, and I'm always learning. As a gardener, you'll never master gardening. Just like bonsai, you never really become a total master. You can master parts and pieces of gardening, but I don't think you'll ever achieve everything that has to be known about gardening. I don't even think it's possible. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And I know this is a long video, but I just want to say thank you. Have a great day.